we'll get going here. But thanks for everyone for tuning in. I know the 2:00 session was originally scheduled with MV Whitlow, but MV had to reschedule, unfortunately. But John O'Grady was gracious enough to step in last minute and pinch hit for us and come in and do a great job. So, John, thanks for stepping in. I'm pretty excited about this module. We didn't quite have anything outside the box in terms of leadership capacities, the way you present it. So I'm excited organizationally. I'm excited for some takeaways individually from this as well. I've heard great things, obviously, with Adam Bachmeyer and the St. Andrews crew that's down there. So I'm not going to do too much. I think I'm going to let you take this away and sit back and listen.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll go ahead and just start sharing my screen here for a little bit. But as I start talking, I hopefully this will be interactive as much as possible with your group. And so thanks everybody for tuning in. Definitely some crazy times here, but nonetheless, you just briefly, that's just who I am and where you can contact me or how you can follow me if at any point in time you're so inclined or to follow up from any of the discussions we've had. Always got to start with the quote, right? Leadership, true leader has the confidence to stand alone, the courage to make tough decisions, and the compassion to listen to the needs of others. He or she does not set out to be a leader, but becomes one by the equality of his actions and the integrity of his intent. So that's from General Douglas MacArthur. Okay, so real quick, who am I? I don't put this up here to blow my own horn. Lord knows there are people who've done far better things with their life and in their life than I have. It's just to give you some context. So as I start speaking, you have a sense of some of the experiences that have caused me to come to the point where I am on some of my thoughts, beliefs, and understandings about leadership, about how to lead people, how to lead organizations, how to influence people. You can see I've got some athletic background there. Clearly, I've spent time in the military. The other thing that I would offer you take from this is a lot of you out there as coaches, you're dealing with the same demographics that I dealt with for my entire 30-year career. I graduated West Point. I'm put in charge of a platoon, which is about 20 to 25 young people who are about the same age as I was at that time. And then all the way through to when I was commanding an organization as large as 3,500 people as well, comprised predominantly of the same roughly demographics that you all deal with, at least in terms of age. And in terms of people who are high energy, want to be high achievers, but just need some direction to help them get to where they want to be and become ultimately the best version of themselves. And so that's the reason why I show this slide. Again, okay, boom, leadership, right? So example is first, voice is second. Example is first, voice is second. And now we'll get into the meat of this. And so if I think I can monitor Q&A as well. And so okay. So, and if not, maybe, you could go ahead and monitor as well, Brad. But if you've got anybody has questions or a specific one of these they want me to go to, I'm happy to do that. But just broadly speaking, I'll kind of go down this list for some period of time, and then I'll pause and open it up to some Q&A, and then maybe go down a little bit further.
Okay.
And so, the first thing when you think about culture, right? And
1 second. Let me. So to all the attendees out there, at the bottom box, you're going to see a Q&A box, and that's where you'd be putting questions, anything pertaining, to what John's in here. At any given time, he can see it, I can see it, and we'll filter those through. But please use the Q&A box and not the chat box. Okay. Thanks.
Awesome. And so, again, when you think about it, first you have to figure out, what is culture, right? And so for me, it's really a collection of all the habits all the things that you actually do and say inside of an organization. And so, I'm always interested in the fact that people will say, hey, I'm trying to, build a culture. I'm trying to develop a culture. And that can take time and does take time. But really, if you think about it, your culture is nothing more than your last act. The last thing that we did as a team, the last thing that you did as a person inside of this organization, that begins our culture. And that's one of the reasons why culture needs to be guarded every single day, because over time, that collection of actions and the words that we use holistically make up our culture, okay? And so if you want to change culture, just start changing what you do and how you speak. And you're already on the road to changing culture. You don't have to come up with a whole bunch of big ideas and spend a lot of time necessarily. Now, to further build out on that, to give it some structure so that it isn't ad hoc and it's with intention and purpose, you want to go ahead and establish, and I apologize, a spelling error there, vision. That's vision. That's not an American way of spelling vision or a Canadian way of spelling vision. It's vision, mission, and values. And so spending some time to think about that, those three things are critically also important to culture, because that starts basically creating the space, if you will, the boundaries, if you will, for how people should act and speak inside of this culture in a way that's going to further enhance and build the culture versus create a new subculture that's contrary to the one that you want. And so it's really important for that. The other thing that's critical about this, I like to think of, use the metaphor of aerodynamics, right? And so if you think about a plane that's getting constructed, okay, aerodynamics is critical because you want to reduce the drag on a particular object, okay? And so if you think about it, if you think of your culture as an object, or what you want to do is you reduce anything that's going to be a drag on that culture, something that's going to inhibit that culture to fully develop. And so making sure that your vision, mission, and values are, again, metaphorically, aerodynamically designed for optimal efficiency will help mitigate the likelihood of something occurring or there being a drag on your culture. A vision, mission, and values that are not aligned and aren't metaphorically aerodynamic will likely lead to a culture that isn't really what you had intended it to be, what you had hoped for it to be, or in the worst case, again, it can end up being contrary to what you want it to be. Okay, and so, as you start going down this road and you get the vision, mission, values, right? I've been in a lot of different locker rooms, okay? I've worked with the New York Jets, the Chesapeake Bay Hawks, Army, men's and women's lacrosse, Georgetown University women's lacrosse, Georgetown Prep High School. So different levels, okay? I say that just to give you a sense of different levels of some of the organizations that I've worked with, as well as inside corporate America. And I go all those places and all these words are everywhere, right? All the words, they're up in the locker room, they're hanging in the hallways. We got the t-shirts that say, pride plus determination equals winning, one degree better every day, and all these different things, right? I'm sure you all have that inside your programs too. Where I came from, Army lacrosse, it's family, tradition, toughness, okay? The challenge, though, is how do you bring these words to life? Because everybody's got the words. Some of them are same, some of them are different. But how do you bring these words to life? That is where most organizations fail when it comes to creating a culture of sustainable winning and cultivating a culture of sustainable winning, because you do have to cultivate it every day. Think of it like a garden, okay? And it's got to be done with intention and purpose. And so, assuming you have figured out, the broad contour of what culture is, assuming you've got, a good vision, mission, and values, and for organizations who struggle with that, I help them do that, and I help them do that as a group collaboratively. So it's their vision, their mission, their values. That's critical. Maybe if you're at a younger level, even at high school, I would offer to some extent have the players be part of that. Maybe below high school, maybe it's just, okay, here's kind of what we're doing, and here's why I think that way. Have a conversation about it. Any questions, help them better understand, and then, just move out. So what are some ways that you can go ahead and start doing that? And so at this point, what I'll do is I'll just pause for a second, though, to see if there are any questions that anybody may have about anything I said. And not only questions, so I know it says Q&A, so it implies you got to hang a question mark on that thing. But if you've got a comment, or you're like, hey, you know what? I think I heard you say X, and I think I want to push back a little bit. I'm okay for that too, because hey, look, that's how I learn. So I'll hold here just for a few seconds. If I don't see anything light up in the Q&A, I'll go ahead and continue. And while I'm doing that, I'll take a little drink of water here. Okay.
I think there's some pretty key points on there that you hit on. Culture is such an important cog in organizations, and for college coaches, it's within the collegiate framework that you've got tons of considerations with your high school and club programs. It's there's all sorts of different frameworks, and you've got cultures inside of other cultures inside of others. So I think some organizations struggle establishing their own culture and identity within the larger framework, and some absolutely succeed and push through. So it becomes more of a what's the word be identifying what exactly your culture is.
Right. You bet. No, those are great points, Brad, and especially the part about cultures within cultures. And so, hey, if you've got an athletic department, or an institution that has some pretty strong culture, some pretty strong values, et cetera, as I talked about within your own program, the vision, mission, and values needing to be aligned and aerodynamic, it's probably in your best interest that, your culture is similarly aligned to some extent and aerodynamic with the institution that you work at or the athletic department that you work at. And again, some have it better than others. If you walk into an organization, they don't have any of that. Okay, well then you're kind of free to just roll your own game. And so that is an important consideration as well. And again, I apologize for the spelling on the vision. That's unprofessional. But as Brad mentioned, this is something that came to fruition last night around, I think it was 10 o'clock Eastern time at night. And so I'm putting this together on the fly a little bit, and I'm happy to do it though. I'm actually psyched about it. Okay, so if there's no other questions, we'll continue to move on. And where we broke initially before that was, hey, okay, everybody's got all these words, everybody's got this vision, this mission, values, right? That they're gonna, it's gonna build a framework of their culture. And then it usually just stops there. The words on a t-shirt, the words on a wall, the words in the program, the words in the lifting room, whatever it may be. But we struggle bringing them to life each and every day. And so here's some things I'm going to offer to you. So as I think about culture is really, what we aspire to be, right? Because it's partly vision. It's how we act each and every day right? Which is in part mission, like what we do. And then it's values, who we are, right? And lots of times those values should be aspirational, right? Nobody, I mean, I don't know of any program that has dishonest schmuck as a value that they, want to espouse, right? Because it's not aspirational. And so the rules, I go into programs, lots of programs, and they have a bunch of rules, right? Now, and just ask yourself right now, if you're a coach, do you have rules inside your program? And what I would offer is, okay, that's a way, and that's okay. But if you want to kind of get your culture to the next level, what I would offer is consider, instead of rules, or at least limit rules to the maximum extent possible, consider standards, expectations, and accountability. Because in my mind, rules are the lowest common denominator. I mean, if you have a rule in your program that is something other than the lowest common denominator, like don't miss practice, don't be late for practice, must maintain, academic eligibility of it, whatever that is, right? Those are usually the floor when you think about it. And if you're a coach out there and you got a rule that's aspirational, please write it in the Q&A box. I'd love to see it. And it very well may exist. Standards as well can sometimes be like lowest common denominator, okay? But you can set those standards kind of wherever you want, just like a rule, okay? And standards are about conduct. Standards are about how we go about our business. I would not necessarily put standards as performance-based if you can avoid it. Other than again, there may be some standards in terms of academics or some other things that are just have to be in place. Expectations are aspirational. I don't know anybody who has an expectation, right? So expectations can be aspirational, okay? And so right off the bat, you have standards and expectations, and you're already moving from the lowest common denominator, which are rules, and you're getting into a higher level of space in terms of culture, and in terms of the effect of that culture on the behavior, because we're talking about behaviors here, standards of behavior, expectations for behavior, and then accountability. And what's also good about accountability, standards and expectations, is that unlike rules tend to be pretty static, meaning, hey, no one's late. You can't miss practice. You miss a practice during the week and you don't play. That's a rule. Okay. Well, what happens when you got the one kid on your team whose mom, maybe it's a single parent situation, got a younger brother and sister, and there's a situation going on at the house, and maybe there was a medical emergency with the mom or something like that, and the kid ended up missing practice. Does that kid not play? Maybe they're the best player on your team too. Does it, right? You got the rule, coach. Hey, you miss practice, you can't play. Well, let's make the exception this time. Okay, well, now is it really a rule? And what about the other kid who misses it, but for some other contextual reason that's far less compelling than the one I just offered, right? And I use those as examples, but with standards and expectations and accountability is your dial as a coach where you could take into account context. And you may hold that player accountable still, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in the form of the rule where it's, hey, you're no longer playing. You could do other things to still hold that person accountable because they do have a responsibility still to the team. And so that's just one way I would offer you to help start bringing some of your words to life. Standards and expectations that highlight, that raise, make it aspirational to these words that you have in terms of mission, value, vision, et cetera. And then use the accountability dial. Rules tend to be lowest common denominator and not necessarily aspirational. I see a question in here. One of my expectations is to communicate early and often, to be accountable to the team and staff. Yeah. Hey, I mean, that is a great comment there, Chris, and I appreciate that. And clearly, as a coach, right, you want to have expectations for yourself, right? You want to have standards for yourself, and you should hold yourself accountable. And there's a great example of that. So I appreciate that question for sure. The next one I'm going to go to is, okay, so here's the question, coaches. I want you to think about it for a second. If I came into your program, if you hired me, right, I come into your program and I ask you, who are your leaders? So just think about that for a second. Who are your leaders? And if you're a coach out there and listening, what I'd like you to do too is just type into the Q&A, if you would. I'm going to assume everybody's got a team of roughly 30 to 50 people, this ballpark, okay? Right now, just if you would, just type a number of how many people you think are, if I said, who are your leaders, you got 3 or 4 or 5, however many names pop in your head. Okay, give me a number. Go ahead and populate the Q&A, if you would, please. This way I know everybody's alive and listening. Okay, I see it starting to populate here. So I got 3 from Cynthia. I got 4 from Kevin. I got 8 from Chris. I got another Kevin, 6. I got, looks like Chloe, 3. Kenny, 2 to 3. Jacob, 3. Okay, yep. Yeah, okay, so, again, that's about standard in terms of Nick, 4. Yeah, so that's about standard answer that I got. Okay, and so here's what I would offer to you, coaches. Whoop. I do not want that. Tell whatever the number of players you have on your team. That's who your leaders are. That's how many leaders you have. It's important that you at least try to understand that. And here's why I say that. Because every single body is a leader. And if you don't think of it that way, and you don't communicate that clearly to every one of them that way, then automatically certain people who aren't leaders are off the hook. They're off the hook. So I would argue that the brand new person to your organization who just sits quietly and goes about their business and works hard is a leader. No different than the brand new kid to your program who's quiet, but body language sucks most of the time in the locker room, when just after the coach got done speaking, after a drill, also works hard, is also a leader. And so people are leading all the time. The only question is, how effective are they? And are they leading in a manner that's aligned with your standards and expectations, with your vision, mission, and values? Those are the only 2 questions. How effective are they? And are they leading in a manner aligned with all the things I just talked about, or are they not? All of a sudden, everybody views themselves differently once you go ahead and embrace that concept, that notion. If you do not, it leaves room for all sorts of behavior, all sorts of leadership, because they are leading, people are watching, and they will have an influence if they're effective, for sure. Now, if they're ineffective and, they're not necessarily positive, you can maybe live with that. Your worst case is the effective leader who is not aligned with any of those things that you've established as a program. That's your worst case. So that's pretty important concept, I think, personally. Any organization that I've ever been in command of, everybody's a leader. It's the first thing I tell everybody. Now, how you lead, in what way and manner you lead, that could be very individual. And will there be certain people designated formally as leaders? Absolutely, right? We call them captains. We call them assistant coaches. We call them head coaches. Maybe there's a leadership council that you've got that has some formal leadership role as well. And so, but everybody is a leader. Okay, so here's the next one, right? Again, this is ways in which to go ahead and start bringing out the culture and actually empower people inside your organization with these fundamental concepts. So I'll go into organizations, and if you're a coach out there and you have a depth chart, just a depth chart, right? Okay, for starting attack, D, backup, whatever, go ahead and just type a Y in the Q&A. If you have one, just hit yes, Y for yes, and hit the Q&A. Just about every coach I know has a leadership depth chart, even if it's in their head. Many of them have it written up. Like, some post it for everybody to see. Others, it's just, for the coaches to see. So if you have that, go ahead and type that Y in. And so the next question that I would ask coaches is, I'll say, okay, hey, show me your leadership depth chart. And just about every single coach that I've ever worked with kind of, cocked their head a little bit and said, what? I said, well, I see your depth chart, up on the wall here, coach. And, I mean, you know who your third string goalie is, even though you really only have two goalies. But there's a kid who's playing D-Midi right now who in his sophomore or her sophomore year in high school played goalie. And so if, God forbid, you have some crazy situation, you've gone so far as to think through who my third string goalie is. Why wouldn't you do that from a leadership standpoint? And so I would offer, again, that goes to how effective are they as leaders, and are they acting in ways aligned with the things that you've said are important. That's another great way of helping to understand really the human dimension of the organization that you're leading and those people. It's also a great way to start identifying some high potential people who could potentially, step up into formal leadership roles at some point in your program. And then further, how to develop those people to ensure that they're best situated to do that when their time comes. When I talk to coaches a lot of times I hear it's like, last year's group of captains and seniors were awesome. I just don't know about this year, man. I'm a little worried. And my response back to that is, well, that's happening for a couple of reasons, probably. One, you have a leadership development program in place and you're intentional about it, and it's just for whatever reason not having the efficacy that you want. You're right. It's not, you're not getting through to the kids, or maybe you're not as intentional as you thought you were, or whatever the case may be. Or the other is you really don't have a program to do that at all, and it's just ad hoc, and you're hoping that some kid presents themselves as this, leader figure. And so leadership depth chart is a great one. All of that, the who are your leaders, right? The leadership depth chart helps you start to identify what I call your culture carriers. Who in the organization are your culture carriers? Because again, not everybody's the same. Not everybody's, as confident, as one another. different people bring different things and skills. Some people can better influence others through, just being that quiet, hard-nosed worker. Others are better at it in like communication and inspiring, people. Others are good at it and just being a really good listener to other people on the team and helping them struggle and think through things. So there's a whole bunch of ways that can manifest itself. But at the end of the day, if you think through if you acknowledge the who are your leaders concept, and then you go through your leadership depth chart, what you could start to figure out are some of those key elements inside your organization who are going to be your culture carriers. They're the ones that you're going to kind of formally and informally help people look to. And you're also going to think through intentionally how you put them in positions where they can actually assume either a formal or informal leadership role at various points during the week, various points in practice, you name it. When you pick the kids who are going to demonstrate a particular drill, maybe, or you just, you're just picking your best players. Maybe you want to pick the culture carriers too, as well, and make sure, they're empowered a little bit as well and acknowledged. So I'll stop there for now. Again, just as a kind of a break here to see if there are any questions that anybody may have on anything that I've talked about so far, or like I said, pushback, or whatever the case may be. Go ahead and in the Q&A, go ahead and you can drop something there if you'd like.
Kind of funny. Well, it's ironic you mentioned the leadership depth chart, because we have our lacrosse structure, our box lacrosse structure in Canada is quite unique, but we have a junior program, 16 to 21-year-old players. And for years we had the same kind of group of leadership. And if it wasn't myself, it was one of my best friends who actually took the lead on the program. But for 18 years, one of the two of us was the head coach for this team. And I remember back in 2001 when we first started having our conversations about how we were going to change this team for a little bit more of a longevity success. And it was developing a leadership growth chart or depth chart in terms of who was going to be taking over that culture carrying personality year after year, and how could we make that tradition, and how could we establish that culture so that when we both have left, it carries on. So quite interesting. I don't think I used the term depth chart before, but I'm certainly going to start now.
Yeah, great. Yeah. And so again, that's part of a couple of things, right? So that's part of your responsibility, I know as a leader, to understand a little bit the human dimension of your organization, to ensure that there's that next crop of leaders coming, right? That we grow leaders. I mean, in the U.S. Army, from day one, we recognize when we're leaders inside that organization, a formal leader, one of our paramount responsibilities is to grow leaders from within. Because, it's not like we can go ahead and just say, 15 years down the road, oh, I need, these types of people in my organization. We don't just go out and put a hiring sign up looking for somebody with 15 years experience in the U.S. military. Because only people who got 15 years in the U.S. military are people who've been in for 15 years. And so we better have been developing them each and every single day. And so that's an important part of it as well. And then really the last one, which I think, Brad, you kind of were starting to get at too a little bit, is, it's part of your legacy. It helps you intentionally think through how you're going to invest in that human capital, right? And what your legacy as a leader is going to be. We use words like, coaching tree and this, but, not everybody has to end up being a coach. Let's just develop people to be the best people that they can possibly be. And most coaches I know speak to that being something that they fundamentally see as their role, and something that the really great coaches take incredible pride and satisfaction in. And it's just another tool to help you think through that process of doing that. So I appreciate that comment. And Chris has a question here. How deep do you have a leadership depth chart? Well, I mean, Chris, I think that depends a little bit. It depends on what level of the program you're at. The answer, I think, for high school is going to be a little bit different, maybe for college. If for no other reason, college, you tend to have a little bit more time to spend with those kids. But I would say go as deep as you comfortably can. Excuse me. And, even if you might be able to go like the first 10 deep, like 1 through 10. And then after that, maybe it just kind of becomes buckets, like high potential, medium potential, low potential, as an example. And then you don't have to worry about, going 1 through 52 or 1 through 36. The other thing is it depends on how much time and energy you have, right? And that's a function of, do you have a bunch of assistants or don't you have a bunch of assistants? The other, thing you can do too is go outside of the team. So who else has high touch points with these kids? So maybe you can, co-opt a teacher or two to kind of go, hey, here's some criteria, how do you see, John O'Grady playing out in some of these things, trustworthiness, reliability, accountability, whatever 5 or 6 words you may want to give them to help fill in some pictures, other part of the puzzle for you is an idea. And then Chloe, I love the new perspective. Okay, no, that's not a question. That's just a telling me thanks. And so I appreciate that, Chloe, and I'm glad you love the idea of culture carriers. You are quite welcome. All right, so where did I leave off? Okay, culture carriers. Okay, so player and captain-led culture, right? So we often say we want a player-led organization, right? We often say we want our captains to be captains, be great, go out and be great captains. And we put we slap a C on some kid's chest, maybe give them a little smack on the butt, say, congratulations, go get them, Tiger. Here's what I know about leadership. Well, I know more than one thing, I believe. And then I think a whole bunch of other things and continually evaluate that and reflect. Peer, or what I refer to as near peer, or near peer leadership is the most difficult leadership known to the human being, known to mankind, okay? You put me in charge of a group of, 15-year-olds, and I don't have nearly as much time assuming a leadership role and acting a little bit like a leader. You put me in charge of my age, but let's just say 35. Let's just imagine for a second I were 35 again. And you put me in charge of a bunch of 35-year-old men and women, and I don't have nearly as easy a time establishing myself and being the leader. I just don't. Well, what do we do with our kids? Yeah, we slap the C on the chest. Go get them. Good luck. And then we want them to lead. What tools have we given them? What preparation have we done with them to arm them to actually go out and lead in what is the most difficult context in which to lead? And so the leadership development program, one with intention and purpose, doing some of the things I talked about before that I got to this bullet, communicating that routinely, does a couple of things. It gives the kids the words, and that's one of the key things I think we need to do better as adults. We need to give the kids our words so that they can make them their own. because most of the times these kids know what right is at the end of the day. And if they don't know, they at least feel it. There's some inclination when they're around something and they see something and they're like, but I just don't know what to say, or I'm not confident of how to say it. Okay. Culture, mission, vision, values, standards, expectations, those things start to create, again, this clear picture, this space, and it gives a mandate, and it makes it easier, and it creates an environment where those kids who are designated as informal leadership roles feel safe to actually act in a manner of being a leader. And there's a whole host of other things you can do leading up to the point when that person gets the C on their chest. But let's just assume now we have the captain. We have, the captains. What things, so just ask yourself, coach, and if you've got a specific answer to any of this, please, again, put it in the Q&A. So what things do you specifically do or say to your captains that facilitates them or empowers them or enables them to actually lead in a demonstrative way where it's very clear that, hey, I am leading right now? What are some things? Does anybody have any specific techniques? If you do, go ahead and put them in the Q&A, and we'll, depending on how many go in here, we'll go ahead and read those. And hey, look, these are questions I ask when people come in and they hire me. This is some of the process I go through, and then we spend as much time, sometimes it's the full season, sometimes it's just, on and off, whatever it is, going through this, and I become a little bit of an accountability partner as well. Okay, so let me offer you a couple of suggestions, because I don't see anything necessarily coming into the Q&A.
So, well, John, I mean, maybe I can give you mine. So,
sure, please.
Was that question more on the process or the actual talk?
So it was more on what specific things do you do or say as a coach with your captains that makes them feel like they know that and that they can go ahead and lead, and that they actually do that in a way that's very visible and pragmatic.
Okay, so I mean, one of the techniques or jobs I guess we've done is, we'll bring our kind of senior leadership, the guys that are, the carriers of the culture, the guys that have been around, guys that I trust. We'll bring them in to actually put our inaugural or our initial meeting that season. We'll bring them in to actually put that agenda together, and I'll give them certain responsibilities in that and say, I want you guys to come up with a plan, and let's circle back on this, and whatever it might be, a couple hours, it might be 10 minutes, whatever it might be. I always tell them, you're going to deliver that part. And with my younger guys, it might have been pertaining to how they keep the locker room, laundry responsibilities, that kind of stuff. And it wasn't about delegating. It was, how are we going to handle this? What's the process going to be? So that was the way we handled it.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think those are all great ideas. We've got Tom, who says, I insist my captain participate in all activities, including the setup and tear down of practice fields. So I think that's great. You bet. They're demonstrating leadership there. They're demonstrating that they're not necessarily better than anybody else. And about how to go about doing things. One of the things, if you remember that first quote, it was about leadership is first about action, and second about words, right? And so showing the young kids how to do that, and showing the young kids that everybody is a part of this team and contributing is great. They must be involved, not just tell others things to do as well. So those are two very good comments as well. So let me offer a couple of suggestions here to you. So It depends on what level again, right? But, sometimes the captain's actually leading the calisthenics, or warm-ups or, dynamics. Some programs now, where you've got the strength and conditioning coach or leading people through that. One of the things I would offer is maybe have the strength and conditioning coach do a session or two with the captains so that they can lead the team through that. And then, hey, strength and conditioning coach, how about you just watch and make sure that players are doing that properly, proper technique, that they're not half-assing it, so to speak, so that they are actually preparing their bodies properly. And let your captains lead that, even though you have the strength and conditioning coach maybe who is more than happy to do it. Another one that I would offer is you make sure your captains know that as a total group, so let's say you got 4 captains. Captains can, if they choose to, call 2 timeouts at any time during practice. 2. Maybe you just say 1, whatever you're comfortable with. I offer you give them 2 opportunities. Doesn't matter how many captains you have, even if you have 1, you get 2 opportunities. And the second, it's like in a game, like when you call a timeout in a game, coach, right? You're now on the clock. You don't get to talk forever. You don't get you kind of had to think a little bit about even, okay, I'm calling this timeout and here's why. I'm calling this timeout because of energy. I'm calling this timeout to calm people down. Calling this timeout because it's a situational thing and we're going to draw up a play, right? So you just don't even just randomly go up, timeout, and then start thinking about what you're going to talk about. And, put them on the clock. Tell them, hey, from the second I acknowledge your timeout and say yes, 2 minutes, click. 2 minutes, I'm blowing the whistle, and whatever you're doing is done. I could care less whether you got your message out or not. That is a great way. And then if there are times in practices where you as a coach have kind of been like, called your own timeout, so to speak, you've been like, all right, hey, stop, everybody bring it in, This type of effort is not who we are. It's not going to get us where we need to be. It's certainly not going to let us beat the number 2 team this Saturday in the nation. So let's pick up the energy. Let's refocus. Let's put the past behind us. And I'm going to blow the whistle and let's get back to business the way we know how to be, in the way we, to our standards and our expectations. Now after practice, get the captains, be like, hey, were you sensing the same thing I was, or was that just, it's okay, maybe they weren't. And then you have those discussions. That now, you think about empowering those kids as leaders. You think about them having to think also a little bit about more than just their own play and what's going on around them a little bit, and really assume that leadership role. That's pretty powerful. I've seen it do incredible things. The other thing, last little tidbit I'll give you on as another suggestion is halftime. Halftime, lots of time coaches will quickly huddle up together and the team goes off and then you coaches come in. Okay, I have also seen where the captains, and it's really powerful, the captains and the senior group, whoever your seniors are, at the same time the coaches are huddling, they'll quick huddle and the captains will do their own kind of like, okay, hey, first half, what do we talk about what they saw, what they see. It's great because it also empowers your captain, your senior group a little bit as well, not just the captains. And then coaches, as you are getting ready to head in to get with the team, those captains know, or captain, but one of them speaks. Doesn't matter which one. Be like, hey, you got anything from that? Hey, coach, energy. If you weren't going to talk about it, you may want to, or hey, I think we're just really uptight. I think we just need to relax. Okay, all right, right? Because you see things from one side of the point of view, right? But the players are the ones actually out on the field, and quite frankly, they're the ones who are around each other more than you are with them, probably, right? And so they may pick up on a couple of things that you just quite hadn't seen, or you and the coaches talked about, but you weren't really sure, and now they affirm it, in their one or two quick comments that they get to you. Now, you don't have to speak about, you're not obligated, but there's another great way to put those players kind of in charge in a demonstrative way. So those are just two examples of that. And you all are smart enough to come up with other ways where you're like, yeah, I want a player-led organization. I want a captain-led driven team. Again, when do they get the opportunity to actually do it, to practice it, to demonstrate it? You've got to create those situations for them. Where do you focus your energy as a leader? Okay, and by energy, I mean, to me, I would focus on a lot of the intangibles, right? Like enthusiasm, energy, where it doesn't matter what skill a person has, level of athletic ability necessarily, in terms of helping, again, towards that culture. Because I don't know any culture that says we want a culture of 100 goal scorers. We want a culture of 50-50 goals assists. So, focus on the things that are going to further inculcate your culture when you're highlighting things on tape, maybe, right? When you're, it's that play that doesn't make it into the scorecard ever, right? It could be somebody's, play on the scout man down that week. Whatever it is, highlight those things. Put your focus and energy there. I'm not saying at the cost or expense of X's and O's by any stretch, but that's not a bad way to do that. And highlight the little wins as well. Georgetown University, we started this thing called Gas Me Up Fridays. And so I did a session with them in the beginning of the year about, hey, what's it mean to be a good teammate? We did a values session, and we created a word cloud for each one of those things. Teammate word cloud, values word cloud. And so Fridays, at the beginning of the Friday team meeting, we'd put those two up, and then any teammate could highlight a fellow teammate who demonstrated something in either one of those word clouds, right? So, Susie would stand up, she'd go, teammate, selfless. I want to highlight Mindy, boo-hoo, because she was incredibly selfless during the week. She filled a different role than she's used to filling, and I just want to say thanks, great teammate. Boom, sit down. Some days we get 1, some days we get 4 or 5, some days we get, whatever. Great way to just celebrate little wins, celebrate, again, take those words and actually put them into action in little ways, with intention, routinely, so that your culture is constantly cultivated and curated. A little exercise to do as well is, just kind of where people get to know each other. You stand up and you just talk about a hero, a highlight, and a hardship. Again, it's just the way of bonding a little bit. First time you do that may not be as open, do it a few other times, and all of a sudden, people, as they start to trust one another and feel psychologically safe, right, in that space you've created, you get some pretty powerful things, and some bonds are deeper, and you begin to know one another a lot better. Understand the difference between responsibility versus accountability. Adam Bachmeyer from St. Andrews was on just prior to me, if any of you were on that session. But I did a virtual, Zoom session with him and some of his team leaders, and we really dove into, the difference between responsibility and accountability, how those words are often interchanged, and incorrectly so, but how vital those words are to, again, keeping your culture moving in the direction that you want it to be, to have things happen inside your culture that actually buttress and support your culture versus working opposed to your culture. uh, two very critical words and concepts that a lot of organizations fail to meet and understand. And again, it's also about, once you go through that, your kids have this incredible, they understand it, they see it, and now they're like, oh, okay, even if now my teammate comes up to me and starts holding me accountable for something, I may not like it, I may not feel good at the time, but we talked about that concept, and I know why they're doing it, because it's vital if we want to have a elite culture, if we want to have a culture of excellence. That's why they're doing it. They're not doing it just to be something less than nice. I don't think I can curse on this, nor should I. Effective goal setting and techniques, and thinking through how do you really go about goal setting. And coaches, one of the things I would offer, in my point of view, is lots of times we put a lot of goals associated with outcomes. And quite frankly, outcomes, there are so many variables that we don't control that it's a little bit of a fool's errand to do so. Now, look, I'm all about winning. I'm all about winning, trust me. And I'm a big fan of winning. But and it's okay to have some goals that are like that. But where I focus most of my energy and where I would offer the teams who I work with is, to me, process goals plus performance goals equal outcomes. And so if you just take care of the process and you have really good goals associated with process, and you have really good goals associated with performance, the outcome is likely to take care of itself. We can get overwhelmed with these outcomes that we establish for ourselves, and we lose all the real important things that undergird the ability to even get to those outcomes. So that's just something else I would talk to. Toxic people, right? So we talked about, everybody's a leader. Only question is, how effective are they? And are they leading in the right direction, meaning aligned with your culture or not? So what about the person who's toxic? And that comes in many forms, right? There's the passive aggressive, there's the body language, there's the slow roller. I mean, you all know better than I do, coaches. You've experienced it all. How do you handle that? And what do you do to mitigate some of that? And so a concept I would offer to you, and we don't have time to go through it here, would be come up, you've got your eligibility, right? Academic eligibility, there's certain eligibility standards, not rules, standards, or expectations for your team. So ask yourself and take some time and come up with, what is your cultural eligibility? Do you have a cultural eligibility? And if so, what is it? If you want to be eligible to play on this team, culturally, the following things, are expectations or standards. And then develop that. And now when you get the toxic behavior, that's something you can point to that you've articulated once already in terms of like, hey, if you want to be eligible to play on this team, the body language stuff, no, that's not part of our cultural eligibility. You are approaching being ineligible to play. No different if, 2.0 is the eligibility, and you get mid review grades, and you got a couple of kids who are sitting at a 2.2, a couple of kids are 1.9. You're gonna have a conversation with them, going, "Hey, something's got to change, or you're not going to be eligible." Cultural eligibility. Okay, another exercise. Great team. So tell everybody to really think about and take some time. And there's ways to do this and exercise to do it. But hey, what's a great team look like to you? Okay, phase 2 of that is, what's our team look like right now? And then where are the gaps and what are we going to do about it? And then once you decide that, what if we said that great team that we had envisioned was us on our worst day? You want to talk about aspirational, right? You want to talk about process. You want to talk about performance. You want to talk about enhancing your culture. It's not a bad exercise. So these are just a couple of things that I had wanted to talk about. I know we're actually. Oops, I apologize. We are over the time. So, Coach, shut me down, and I'm happy to answer questions. I do a free Zoom session every Saturday. This Saturday is Coach Tierney. So if you want to hop on, contact me. Some more leadership quotes, right? Leadership's not about doing more things. It's about doing the right things. And then this is my quote. The problem with this world is the intelligent people are full of doubts and questions, while the stupid ones are full of confidence and poop. Too often we value the latter and mock the former. And so my hat's off to you for being in that group that understands that, you have a healthy sense of curiosity and humility, and you show up to things like this to continue to grow and be better than you were maybe hopefully when you showed up. Again, here's how you can contact me if you have any questions or you want to get in on the free Saturday weekly Zoom sessions every Saturday. I've been doing it for the last 8 weeks or so. Just reach out to me. So Brad, hey, I appreciate it. I apologize I went over. I'm happy to go longer or shorter or whatever you want to do, brother. So I'm gonna stop sharing and over to you, okay?
No, there's a keep that profile up there so people can jot that down or
take a photo, screenshot it, whatever you want to do.
Yeah. But there was a couple questions in the chat, and I don't know if we got to one.
Okay.
Specifically the one from Jason. I see the one from Jacob, and
okay, yeah. I see it now. I apologize. So let me take a look.
No problem.
Yeah, so thanks for pointing me to that. So Jason, what separates who are elite team leaders in a place like West Point, which is a place that breeds leaders? What are those elite leader traits? Yeah, so there's a couple, but the top two that I would offer to you were two that I just spoke about a second ago. It's humility and curiosity. Now, I know that may sound odd to you, but those are two paramount ones to any great leader I have ever observed in my life. Because when you're humble enough to realize you don't know it all, and you're curious enough to know as much as you can, that's a powerful combination. It's a powerful combination. I don't care if it's in the space of leadership, in the space of being a parent, in the space of being a partner, a coach. You apply that to anything, a priest, a lawyer, doctor. The second you think you know it, and the second your curiosity starts to wane, is the second you no longer become a leader. Now, there are some other traits as well, but I offer those two in the interest of time. Okay, Jacob, I was a goalie and usually on the younger side of my teams, and I felt like I was following and not leading like I think a goalie should. Do you have any suggestions on how to empower the people to be more of a leader in that situation? Yeah, so I think, especially for a younger goalie, right? Because the goalie's a unique position. It's almost like being a quarterback in a way, right? Where you're kind of, supposed to be a little bit of a leader of that unit, right? So I think what I would do is, talk to my coaches first, right? And if you're a coach and you have a goalie in that situation, and look, hey, I've dealt with senior goalies in college who, just weren't like, they were leaders, because everybody again is a leader. So that's point one. Let them understand that they don't get to hide and not be a leader. Everybody is a leader. The only question is, are you effective and are you leading in the right direction? So right there, all of a sudden just opens that kid's mental aperture like, oh, okay, I don't get to just hide. The second thing would be, what are your expectations of them? How do you want them to lead? And if nothing else, for a goalie especially, I would let them know and make them aware that they are the one person, they're the only person who has the perspective and point of view that they do on the defensive side of the field. No one else has their perspective. So why would you not want me leading to some degree? And then the next question then becomes, okay, well, what's the best way to go about doing that? Verbally, et cetera. And then talk to the defensive players. What works for you? Hey, did you hear me when they were at goal line extended and I was saying, push them out or push them out? Were you able to hear me? Or do I need to speak up? Oh no, yeah, I heard you. Oh, okay. Is there a better way to communicate that to you? Is there a better way to communicate the slide? Is there a better way to communicate whatever it may be? Right? Get them down the alley, et cetera. So those would be just some ways I would go about doing that. How would you recommend incorporating freshmen to these conversations throughout the summer? Example, hero, right. So one example could be a freshman. Just know when you come in, one of the first exercises we're going to do is a hero hardship and excellence, and highlight. Exercise. So there's one way of doing it. Another great way, and something I didn't talk about that I also believe is important as it comes to developing leaders, and you can look at your leadership depth chart if that's something you do, is come up with little accountability groups. So groups of like 3 or 4 where there's a leader in charge of that group, tucking a freshman up in under that, and you give the first week or two, you give those accountability group leaders the responsibility to help start to understand and communicate, not in lieu of you, but also on top of your voice as a coach. Hey, our mission, our values, our vision, here are some standards and expectations that we have. Each player could be given a simple slide deck or something like that where they could talk through that. So that's another way. And then the other thing that I also offer at coaches at the college level, impress upon the players, is that their relationship with their parents is fundamentally changed, or likely should. And by that I mean, your parents up until this point have always been responsible for you. You now too, to some extent, are also responsible for your parents. And this gets into a whole separate conversation about parents and the different things that they have, right? But that's another great way to bring in freshmen. Okay. Any other questions or am I missing anything in here? Yep, go Army, beat Navy. I love it, Danielle. Thank you. You bet. Okay.
Well, listen, John, we're going to wrap this up. Really appreciate you stepping in like this. I got some tremendous takeaways myself. One thing I try and do with each session beforehand, though, I got to thank our sponsors, because without these guys, this doesn't happen. So Major Series Lacrosse, which is out of Ontario, Uncommon Fit, Franklin Parr Real Estate Team, Sticks and Picks Podcast, the Apex Lacrosse events, Manitoba Lacrosse, and Bear Paw Lacrosse events. Really want to thank them. Without them, this just doesn't happen these couple of weeks. And without guys like yourself giving back and understanding the bigger goal in this, and COVID's tough. COVID's tough for everybody. My phone's not stopped ringing and getting texts from different ideas and concepts from coaches, people across the world. So this has been really beneficial. I appreciate it very much.
Awesome. No, and thanks for you for putting this forum together. Phenomenal. And thanks to all the people who dialed in. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. Yep,
absolutely. Well, we're back at 4:00 with Hannah Leaf, who's she's going to talk about women's box lacrosse. She's Team Quebec and Akwesasne head coach. So it's going to be fantastic. We'll see everybody at 4:00.
Awesome.